Welcome to the ISO Show, dispelling myths and sharing tips for success to improve your business with ISO standards, with your host, Mel Blackmore.
Hello and welcome to the ISO Show. Well, today it's just going to be me, and I'm going to be talking about integrating ISO standards. The reason that I'm covering this topic, and it's just a very brief podcast today, is that we have many organisations that have multiple standards. And we go in to visit new businesses and they may have a quality manual and an information security manual, and they're duplicating the workload. So I thought I'd just share with you some hints and tips on how to integrate ISO standards into one business management system. So typically, organisations might have begun with a quality manual back in the 90s or noughties, and since then they've added on complementary standards, such as ISO 14001, as their clients might have been looking to green their supply chain. Or they may have added on a health and safety standard because, again, it could have been a prerequisite to tender, or they just wanted to make sure that they were reducing risks across their organisation. And typically, these standards have just been bolted on. We find this very typical in certain industries, like the construction industry and also manufacturing. Now, there are a number of issues with that, and we've seen this time and time again, where there are manuals in triplicate, quite often, if it's for 3 standards, and it just becomes unwieldy and, quite frankly, unnecessary. There's a lot of hassle associated with it, which I think in some cases that's why some might think of ISO standards being a bit of a burden and too much like hard work. But in all honesty, it's only as difficult as you make it. You can make it much, much simpler. So what are the issues with having separate manuals? Well, first of all, duplication. It causes confusion. So you might have 3 procedures, and in some cases we've seen it in some organisations, 6 procedures for dealing with non-conformities. How the heck are employees supposed to know how to raise a complaint or an issue? It's really confusing. It adds extra cost. That's not just from a maintenance perspective, but also in terms of the certification body costs. So you should be able to reduce your costs by at least a third for each standard. And because you've got so much confusion and duplication going on, that results in a lack of compliance. Because A, people might not be following the right procedure even though they think that they are, or, quite frankly, many of them just give up and think, well, what's the point? And the downside of that is there is a lack of respect for management, a lack of respect for the system, lack of respect for ISO standards, and that can affect morale internally and communication because it's just not clear. There's no clear direction, structure, systems or procedures. So although with the best intentions that organisations implemented these ISO standards, it's actually working against them rather than for them. Now, in recent years, we've been blessed with a common framework for ISO standards, which makes our lives so much easier. It was known as Annex SL until this year, but it's now actually just known as Annex L. And if you listen to the previous podcast that I did with Paul Simpson, who's the chair of the ISO 9001 Technical Committee, that goes into a bit more detail about that common framework. But ultimately, this is providing the foundation that all ISO management system standards are based on, which is about time, I hear you say. What this means is that it's now a no-brainer to integrate your ISO standards into one simple business management system. Now, you don't actually have to call it a BMS, a business management system. You can call it whatever you like, because you don't need to have a quality manual document anymore, believe it or not. If you have a look at the standard, there's no mention of that. Or indeed, an environmental manual or any other manual for that matter. So it really needs to suit your organisation's culture and the services or the products that you're providing. So we've implemented environmental standards for a leading law firm, and it's simply called the practice management system because it's integrated with their existing way of working, which is their practice management system. Okay, so just a bit of food for thought then, how you want to brand your system. So what I'd like to do is take an analogy of, imagine having 3 houses rather than having 1. So each house represents a standard, ISO 9001, 14001 and ISO 45001. So imagine having those 3 houses. They've all got a roof, they've all got bricks and mortar, and they've all got windows and doors and fixtures and fittings. Now imagine the extra cost. You've potentially got 3 mortgages, which you could liken that to your certification body costs, insurance costs, etc. You've got confusion there because you've got 3 front doors and 3 back doors. Which door do you use? Which bed do you sleep in? So can you see the commonality between and the confusion with having the different standards? And you've also got the triple amount of maintenance, which is typically involved with having 3 manuals. So you've got extra costs for heating, electricity, cleaning, so the day-to-day running of those 3 houses. Now imagine if you scrapped all of that, you made life easier, and you just had one amazing mansion. Welcome to your integrated management system. How do you go about creating that mansion? The first thing that I'd recommend that you do is group your policy statements together. So if we take the example of quality, you've got the quality policy, an environmental policy and a health and safety policy. They should all be a 1-page document each, one which is a statement of intent. Some organisations like to integrate them. Personally, I think it's good to have direction for each of them from the leadership team, but that's a personal preference, and that's typically because quite often in tenders you get asked for a environmental policy statement and a health and safety policy statement. You can be a bit more detailed within them, but again, keep them succinct. You don't really want to have them as long-winded documents. Again, they are a statement of intent. So let's say that the policy statements are like the roof of your mansion, but you might want to add some extra fancy bits on there, like solar panels. So that could be a sustainable procurement policy, a data protection policy. These are at the top of the tree. These are the statements from the leadership team. So you don't just have to stick with a policy statement that has been requested by a particular standard. If it's beneficial for you to cherry pick aspects of an asset management standard and have an asset management policy, fantastic. Stick it on the roof. Now below that are the common requirements. So these are the bricks and mortar that hold everything together and keep your house in order. So this can be likened to all the common requirements within Annex L, as it's known now. And these are typically things like your internal audits, your management review procedure, how you control your documents within your business, which could in effect be branding guidelines as well. So how do you control your documents internally and externally? How you deal with non-conformities and corrective actions, so having one procedure for that. So ultimately what you're doing is getting rid of the 3 internal audit procedures and just having 1. Getting rid of the 3 management review procedures and just having 1. But within those procedures, you will be referencing environment, quality and health and safety, for example. But you just need to have 1 procedure. Keep it simple. Now, those common requirements, in theory, should affect everyone within the business. These are at the core of your business. Okay, so things like your objectives, your procedures, what happens when somebody new joins a company, what happens when somebody leaves the company. This is, the foundation, regardless of which department you work in or the function within the business. So these are common across the business, so they're your bricks and mortar for how you run your business. Now next, you might want to add on your windows and doors, and these are the bits that make your mansion just that little bit more unique. And this could be likened to your operational control procedures. So how you might deal with an inquiry, through to operations, through to billing, customer service. But also from, say, an environmental point of view, it could be how you deal with waste management, monitoring and measuring of your energy consumption. With health and safety, it could be working at height procedures or how to complete a risk assessment. So there are lots of requirements there that make your business unique and that are really important for the business. And that can include controls to meet your legal requirements as well. So if you're looking at GDPR or health and safety regulations, again, you might have specific operational controls that you want to have in place. And they will all sit within each function typically. And finally, now that you've built your mansion, you might just need a few fixtures and fittings. Again, this is going to be unique to your business. And this is what I'd liken it to, the templates and forms. Okay, so these are the things that your employees need to complete in order to be able to get a job done. Now, many organisations have got these forms online, of course, and are using software, but ultimately these are the tools that make everything happen. So they're the documents that are controlled as well, so that ideally they're in a central repository, so everybody knows where to go to, where to find that form that they're looking for. It could be a holiday request form. It could be a new inquiry form. So again, they're unique to your business. So hopefully that analogy of building that house helps you to visualise what your integrated management system could potentially look like. So clearly there are many benefits for integrating management systems. So just to summarise, it helps to keep your life much simpler. Also employees, because the procedures and systems are definitely more effective and easier to understand and to be able to access as well, because you have to remember accessibility is really important. It can save you time and money, not just in terms of maintenance, but ongoing costs in relation to certification body costs. So if you'd like any further information on how to integrate your management systems, we'd be delighted to speak to you here at Blackmores. We've got a blog on our website linked to this podcast. And if you have any other suggestions on topics that we can cover on the ISO show, we'd be delighted to hear about them, because we've got a lineup of interviewees, which is fantastic. And also we've got some more series on how to implement certain ISO standards, which we've